Locked away and awaiting the ultimate punishment, only a handful of women sit on North Carolina's death row. Who are they? What crimes led them here? And will they ever face execution? Let's take a look inside the cases that put these women behind bars forever. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Blanche Taylor Moore. They called her a devoted wife, a loving partner, and a woman of faith. But behind the veil of Southern charm was a deadly secret. One by one, the men in Blanche Taylor Moore's life fell mysteriously ill, suffering excruciating pain, withering away until death claimed them. The cause? A lethal dose of arsenic, administered by the very woman who was supposed to love them. Blanche wasn't just a widow, she was a black widow. Born on February 17, 1933, in Concord, North Carolina, Blanche Kaiser grew up in a deeply dysfunctional household. Her father, Parker Davis Kaiser, was a mill worker, a Baptist minister, and an alcoholic womanizer. According to Blanche, he was more than just abusive. She claimed he forced her into prostitution to pay off his gambling debts. Whether that was true or just another of Blanche's fabrications remains unknown. What is known is that she could switch from quoting scripture to talking about sex in the same breath, a glimpse into the duality of her nature. Blanche married James Napoleon Taylor in 1952, and together they had 2 children. She worked her way up from cashier to head cashier at a Kroger grocery store, where she met and began an affair with her boss, Raymond Reed. Then, in 1973, James Taylor died suddenly of what was believed to be a heart attack. A tragedy? Maybe. But then Blanche's father also died in 1966, reportedly of a heart attack. And then in 1986, her longtime lover Raymond Reed suffered a painful, drawn-out illness that doctors diagnosed as Guillain-Barré syndrome. He didn't survive. Blanche mourned publicly. But privately, she was already seeing someone new. The Reverend Dwight Moore. And not long after their wedding in 1989, Dwight suddenly became violently ill, collapsing after eating a sandwich his new bride had given him. Unlike Blanche's previous victims, Dwight survived. But barely. Doctors discovered Dwight had been poisoned. He had over 20 times the lethal dose of arsenic in his system. When authorities took a closer look at Blanche's past, the pattern was undeniable. They exhumed the bodies of Raymond Reed, James Taylor, and even Blanche's father. All showed dangerously high levels of arsenic. When confronted, Blanche claimed the men had poisoned themselves, a story investigators found laughable. As the evidence piled up, Blanche was arrested on July 18, 1989, and charged with first-degree murder for the death of Raymond Reed. The deaths of her husband, father, and mother-in-law were never officially charged against her, but suspicions remain to this day. Blanche's trial began in 1990, and the evidence was overwhelming. Over 50 witnesses testified, contradicting Blanche's claims that she had never given food to Raymond while he was in the hospital. The jury found her guilty, and on January 18, 1991, Blanche Taylor Moore was sentenced to death by lethal injection. More than 30 years later, Blanche remains on North Carolina's death row, making her one of the longest-serving female inmates awaiting execution in the U.S. She continues to claim she's innocent and spends her days writing poetry and music behind bars. Whether she will ever face execution remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: her legacy as a cunning and deadly black widow is set in stone. Carlette Parker. In the quiet suburbs of North Raleigh, trust was shattered in the most horrifying way. An elderly woman, once full of life, found lifeless in the front seat of her own car. And the woman responsible? A caregiver, someone meant to protect, not prey. Born on June 12, 1963, Carlette Elizabeth Parker seemed to have a promising life ahead of her. A registered nurse assistant, she was entrusted with the care of the elderly. But behind that caregiver facade lay a manipulative thief with a dangerous thirst for money. May 12, 1998, a routine day in Raleigh, North Carolina, turned into a nightmare. Parker had befriended 86-year-old Alice Covington, an elderly woman who trusted her. But trust can be deadly. Parker kidnapped Covington, forced her to withdraw money from her bank, then did the unthinkable: she drowned her in a bathtub. Covington's bruised legs, traces of pepper spray, and possible stun gun burns painted a horrifying picture. When Covington was reported missing from Springmore, an upscale retirement home, police immediately suspected foul play. 2 days later, her body was discovered in her own car, abandoned in a Morrisville field. The evidence was damning. Parker was found with a stun gun and pepper spray, the same items suspected to have been used on Covington. But this wasn't Parker's first crime. In 1985, Parker had already proven she had no regard for the elderly under her care. She had stolen $44,000 from 85-year-old Catherine Stevenson, forging withdrawal slips to drain her accounts. She had been convicted of 16 felony counts, but that wasn't enough to stop her. This time, her greed led to murder. March 29, 1999, after a short but powerful trial, a Wake County jury found Parker guilty of first-degree kidnapping and first-degree murder. The prosecution painted her as a scheming predator who silenced her victim to cover her financial crimes. The defense argued that there was no definitive cause of death, but the evidence spoke for itself. Just days later, Parker was sentenced to death. Carlette Parker now sits on death row in North Carolina, a stark reminder of how greed can turn lethal. She took advantage of the vulnerable, betraying trust in the most horrific way possible. For Alice Covington, what should have been her golden years ended in terror and betrayal. Justice was served, but the scars remain. A chilling case of deception, greed, and murder, one that reminds us to be careful who we trust, because sometimes, even those meant to care for us can be the ones who bring the most harm. 2 women. 2 different paths. But the same deadly outcome. Blanche Taylor Moore and Carlette Parker may not have wielded a gun or a knife, but their crimes were just as chilling. Betrayal wrapped in trust, murder disguised as care. They walked among their victims, smiled at them, even prayed with them. All while sealing their fate. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if you love true crime stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a case. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and remember, not everyone who smiles has good intentions.